Okay, back to the dinim of tzedakah. What is very important in the midst of giving tzedakah is the attitude. For instance, if you give a person, he says the expression, 1,000 gold coins, but you give it to him with a grumpy, not respectful attitude, you lose the whole merit. And if you don't have it, and you give a person a smaller amount, but you give it to him with a nice word, a nice smile, so then you get the proper mitzvah. So therefore, it's important also the attitude that a person, the way a person gives the money to tzedakah. Okay, we said that if somebody asks you for money, you're not allowed to say no, even if you give them like one kernel, it says. Okay, but you're not allowed to scream at a poor person. You have to speak nicely to them. If you have nothing to give them, at least tell them a nice, give them a bracha, make them feel good at least. Okay, next thing is like this. Tzedakah is like a vow. That means if somebody pledges money to tzedakah, they have an obligation to give it. If you don't give it, so then you get the sin of leisa'achel l'shalmei. There's a din by vows. If a person makes a vow, you have up to 3 yomim tevim to keep it. But afterwards, then you're actually transgressing a negative commandment of not keeping your promise. So if a person pledges money to tzedakah, they have to give it. Which means, let's say they pledge money, so he says, you really have to give it right away. You have to give it right away. If there's a poor person there. If he's not there, then you put the money away, you designate the money, and then when you see the poor person, you give it to them. So now there's an interesting shaila. What happens if somebody pledges money? It's a Ramah, in fact. He says like this, somebody is sick. So he says, if this person gets healthy, I'll give $1,000. That's what he says. And the person, God forbid, doesn't get healthy, he's not obligated to pay the debt. But what happens if he said, I'm giving $1,000 on the condition the person gets healthy? And he gave the money. He paid the money already. And the person doesn't get better, the money stays. Because you gave it already. Once you give it, you gave it. Unless there's something called a condition, but there's a din in Gemara that says Tanai Kafel. Tanai Kafel means certain conditions in Torah. We learn it out from Bnei Gad or Bnei Ruvain, because that's the first condition mentioned in Torah. So we learn out that sometimes a condition needs to be doubled. Meaning like this. If he gets healthy, I'll give it. If he doesn't, I won't. So let's say a person says, he gives him money, and he says, if he gets healthy, I'm pledging the money to tzedakah, and he gives it. So then, even if the person doesn't get healthy, the money stays there. But if when he gave it, he says like this, I'm pledging $1,000 that the person should get well, and if not, I'm not promising. Then even though he gave the money already, then he can get the money back, because then it wasn't ever effective in any way whatsoever. Okay. Next, then over there like this. Okay. A person says, what happens if a person says, though, okay, I'm going to give $1 to this and this per person. We just learned that if you just promise tzedakah, the poor people, you have to give it right away. What happens if a guy says, I'm going to give tzedakah to this and this person? So until you meet him, you don't have to give it, because that was the condition. When I see the person, I'm going to give it. But if you just make a general promise to tzedakah, you have to give it right away. That's the halacha. But even then, it says in halacha you're supposed to designate the money, put it aside, that whenever the poor person comes, then you'll be able to give him right away. Next thing is, it says, Keifin ala tzedakah, or ma'asin ala tzedakah. Ma'asin ala tzedakah means you, sometimes it's up to Bais Din, sometimes it depends what the story is. You can force a person to give tzedakah. That's what Gemara says, ma'asin ala tzedakah. A person who forces other people, not forces with a gun, but he convinces other people to give tzedakah, he gets a lot of reward. Number one, he got him to do, and they're doing it, so you get two things. But that doesn't mean, though, that you only get somebody else to give tzedakah, but you don't give. That's not what we're talking about. The one person who gives. In addition to giving himself, he also gets other people to give, so he gets a big reward because it says, Ma'aseh tzedakah shalim. And he says that the people that collect money for tzedakah usually get cursed by the poor people. What happened in the olden times was a person would go around collecting tzedakah from the city, and then they would give out the tzedakah accordingly. And every poor person wanted more money, and they would curse the guy. If you didn't give him more money, they would curse the guy. So Shulchan Aruch says, it's from the Gemara, that they curse you, don't worry about it, because on the contrary, you get a bigger schus when they curse you, because now you did the mitzvah with greater difficulty. So then, that's even better that you get a bigger tzedakah. Now there's an interesting shaila over here brought down. The Chidah, the Rabbi Yosef brings down a case that happened over there. A guy came to the guy in charge of tzedakah, and he said, if you don't give me the amount I want, I'm going to go work on Shabbos. Either give me the money I want, or you're going to force me to go work on Shabbos. So he came to the Rabbi Yosef. What should he do? He said, you're not obligated to give him. You give him what you normally would give him, and the threat that he was going to go be Mechalel Shabbos, that you don't care about, and...
That's on him.
Huh?
That's on him. He's making the decision, not telling him.
I understand, but somebody would think, maybe I should give him money, he shouldn't be Mechalel Shabbos, because indirectly... because I'm not giving him the money, he's going to be Mechal Shabbos. So the Rabbi Yosef Paskins knows it's not true. It is what it is. You give him what you give him, and that's it. Now, the highest level of tzedakah, B'chlal, is interesting. When the pasuk speaks about the mitzvah tzedakah, the real mitzvah tzedakah is like this. A guy's in business, and he's going bankrupt, and he's going to lose everything. And before he bankrupts himself, you help him out. That he should stand back on his own feet. That's the highest level of tzedakah. It's like teaching the difference between fishing. If you fish, you have food for the day. If you teach how to fish, they have food forever. So he said the same thing over here. The best thing is you give him a proper gift, or officially lend him the money. Then, because then that means, and even, somebody falls on the floor, it's hard to pick him up. If somebody's tripping, before they fall, it's easier to catch them and put them back up. So halachically, it's better, the best type of tzedakah is to help somebody, let's say, in a business that needs the money and, does what they help the guy out to get back on his own feet. Okay. Next thing is the Gemara says there's 10 levels of giving tzedakah. The best way of giving tzedakah to poor people we're talking about, I'll tell you the differences in this thing. When it comes to giving money to poor people, the best way is you don't know who you're giving it to, and they don't know who they're getting it from. Why? Because I know who I'm giving the poor man, I know who he is, and I'm giving him the money. In the back of my mind, they said, okay, he owes me one. Or if the person knows who he's getting the money from, he's going to feel bad. He's going to feel indebted to that person. So the Gemara says what they used to do, there was a lishchus chashoy. In the Bais Din, they had this secret fund. The righteous people would just throw money in there. Nobody should see they threw money. And the poor people would come and take money. So nobody knew who gave it and nobody knew who took it. There's a famous story in the Gemara with Mar Ukva. He used to give a lot of tzedakah, but he didn't want anybody to know. So he used to drop money by a poor person's house, like push the door open, throw the money, and it ran away. So this happened many times. So the guy wanted to know who's giving him the money. See, one time he chased him. And Marukva didn't want the guy to know who it was. He actually flew into a furnace. What? He threw himself into a furnace that was burning. Hashem did a miracle, then nothing happened, like Avraham Avinu. But he didn't want anybody to know who was getting the tzedakah from him. He didn't want nobody should feel indebted, nobody should feel, that's the ultimate level of tzedakah. Or at least, the poor man maybe would know who's getting it. Next level is the poor man would know who's getting it, where he's getting it from, but you don't know who you're giving it to. That's, there was a story with the Rebbe, it was Erev Pesach, and this is in Crown Heights, there was a couple living in an apartment building. And Erev Pesach, everybody's kitchen is cooking. Those days they didn't go away to the hotels, they stayed home. So they would stay home and everybody's cooking. So you smelled already in the street, you smelled the Pesach cooking. So somebody went over to Rabbi Label Groner and they said that there's no food smell coming from this apartment. They knew they were poor, but they said nobody was able to smell anything, which obviously meant that they didn't have to cook. So he told the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, this is a long, long time ago. The Rebbe told him, take $500, put it under the door, and run away. Just get somebody, put it under the door, and run away. And 2 hours later, an hour or two later, people already started smelling the cooking for Pesach. Because now they had at least money to go buy food, and they're able to start cooking for Pesach. So that's the importance of giving it. But the Rebbe speaks about that there was lishchas chashoy. In the Beis Hamikdash, the Rebbe also had a lishchas chashoy. But there was a lot of, people should know about it, that they should, and he says, you should never brag about giving tzedakah, but it says like this, and there's an interesting difference. That's the poor people. What happens if you're giving to an institution, or you're giving something? So then it says, it's proper to put your name on it. Why is it proper that if you're donating money for a building or whatever, that your name should be on the building? Because people will learn from you to do it also. So then it says in halacha it's the proper thing to do. But like this...
Then the other people will come to.
No, but it says if people see other people doing it, then that's the case of forcing other people to give tzedakah. When people know that you gave tzedakah, now because of you, they're also giving tzedakah. So that's a high level of tzedakah. What?
If you give the gift to people.
You give one?
To organization, they give two people.
Yeah.
It's called a child.
Yeah. Because the poor person doesn't know it's from you.
Right, but the organization knows who you are. That's not how.
No, it's talking about the poor person himself. You shouldn't feel indebted to you that, that's not a problem. But ideally it's better that you don't know who's giving it and who's getting it. And then that works much better like this. Okay, that's, okay. Next is, you should make sure that Talmidei Chacham, the people that are learning Torah all day, they should be supported. And if he doesn't want, there's another interesting din in halacha. What happens? Somebody needs money, and they don't want to take money. They don't want to take tzedakah. So it says in halacha, you're allowed to tell them it's a loan. You're allowed to tell them it's a loan. And when you kiyarchid like this, so when you get money, Yemir Hashem, you'll pay me back. So then the person will not feel as embarrassed that he's taking tzedakah. He's taking a loan, a long-term loan, interest-free. But then the interesting halacha is like this. If you have a mind, so what happens?
When you bring it back.
Then you get a heart attack that the guy brought it back.
Yeah.
But the din is, if you lachatchila give it, you're giving it as tzedakah, but you're telling the guy it's a loan, or you forgive the loan, or if you forgive the loan, then al pi din, that's giving tzedakah. It's not a loan. It's giving tzedakah. So that's not a problem. But that's the way, it says in halacha, the way to do it, because a lot of people otherwise don't want to personally take tzedakah. For institutions, it's a whole different story. Okay,